Little Melvin's there, Dana.
Wow, it was delightful.
We all know what news is, but do you know what's never news? When someone in the news tells you the truth about the news.
And the media everywhere is mostly liberal. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? There's one Fox, and there's many, many, many more organizations on the left. But the problem is that the weight of all of these organizations on one side of the political spectrum, when you turn on your computer or you walk past the TV, if they're all saying the same thing, the weight of that convinces you that it's true. You don't question it because everyone is saying it. I didn't even notice that there was a bias in the media. You read one story after another or hear it, and it's all based on one anonymous administration official, a former administration official, right? I mean, that's not journalism, that's...
I could listen to that for hours. For us, this is an obvious truth, yet the voice of the hive is so pervasive, it goes unheard, except we just heard her loud and clear. You already know what the media is thinking. Oh, FNC is going to eat this stuff up. You're right. So what? Because whenever the emperor's new clothes are exposed, don't expect the emperor to tell you about it. The conformist media will sweep this under a rug, so it's up to us to burn that rug, even if it's on top of Chuck Todd's head. For decades, the mainstream media defended their bias, saying they aren't liberally biased, just truth biased. And of course, the truth is always liberal, which is funny, because we've lost count of how many times the media has been dead wrong on so many things, from defending terrible institutions to reanimating bad ideas. The only reason they never get called out is because they run the calling out business. And so the ideas they love, born from teachers' lounges and safe spaces, continue to harm us, and there's no speed bump in sight. So forgive us if we find Logan refreshing. She told you what you know already. The media is about conflict. So there can only be two sides, the consensus among them and the marginalized you, and all those ad dollars which back the consensus that keep rolling in. The profit model for the news division isn't news, it's division, which is why in news there is no nuance. When it's embarrassing, there's not even news. It's either their side or the downside. All right, Dana, I think she should be hired by Fox immediately. What say you?
Well,
I thought it was a job interview.
She got the job. Oh, by the way, bad news, Juan.
Yeah, really. Well, then bring her in. You know, just be a chorus. A Trump chorus.
Well, no, but you can't say that because she actually says that she's realizing this, and you can't just dismiss her outright for saying that she's like, now she's part of the alt-right, Juan.
No, I thought Dana's Dana's turn to talk.
Dana, your question before I yell at Juan.
she is Generation X's Bernie Goldberg.
Ah.
So in 2001, Bernard Goldberg wrote a book called Bias.
Right.
He had just left CBS News. And what happened 3 years later after he published it? The Dan Rather piece, which is trying to take down George W. Bush so that with the fake documents about the military service. So she left CBS in 2018, and she's free, much like Bernie Goldberg became free. And it was like the scales drop from your eyes, and then you can see it, and you can say whatever you want. Besides, she did one of the best 60 Minutes reports. It was not about politics at all. She followed around this couple that focused on lions in South Africa. It was amazing. Yeah. Maybe Botswana, but it was amazing.
Interesting. I don't think Bernie would ever wear that dress.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But can I just say, the reason why she didn't realize that there was bias is because she was out there doing real reporting. Yeah. So the biggest criticism of her today is that some people are writing about this interview, which was done by Mike Ritland, who's a former Navy SEAL who served in Afghanistan and I believe Iraq as well. He runs a podcast called Mic Drop. She talks about all of these things she was doing. She's a woman in her 20s, single, went into Afghanistan alone at the time that 95% of the country was controlled by the Taliban. They were hanging women in the soccer stadium, and she was going in to do some real reporting. She lived in Iraq for 5 years.
She was attacked.
She was cleaning blood off of the equipment when her fellow journalists were killed. She was raped in Egypt. And yet these journalists and the media critics are all criticizing her for calling out and telling the truth when she is exactly what they claim to be. be, the one running into the fire like the firefighter, the one actually looking for the truth, the one doing the job and being on the front lines literally for her entire career. So I listened to the entire thing. It's a 3-hour podcast. I wish it wouldn't end. Her story, she's getting a lot of attention for the media bias comments, but the stories she tells about Afghanistan and Africa and war coverage are incredible. I really
I subscribed to Mic Drop today on your recommendation.
There you go.
Well, I would say this to you. Gee, there are a lot of journalists who go into the war zones and who are often treated as, oh, just liberal media, but guess they're in war zones on a daily basis. They're there tonight. And the idea that she puts forward, oh, sources, just horse dithers, how ridiculous.
What do you mean?
Sources are so important for any working journalist.
She knows it because she
I'm going to tell you, they're very important.
Sources in Afghanistan.
And she talks about, oh, well, you can only get the truth on certain conservative outlets. Well, what about, it's not just Fox, what about the Wall Street Journal? What about Drudge? Oh, my goodness, all #1, despite whatever she has to say.
She didn't say that Truth. She said both sides of the story.
Well, I'm just telling you, it's out there. And we live in an era where there's lots of niche journalism, but she says, oh, you can't say that.
I'm surprised you're not defending this, honestly.
Do you want to hear what she says about Trump? And then this is, she's talking about the coverage of Trump.
All the coverage on Trump all the time is negative. The former executive editor of the New York Times has a book coming out, Jill Abramson, and she says we would do, I don't know, dozens of stories about Trump every single day, and every single one of them was negative. She said, we have become the anti-Trump paper of record. Well, that's not our job. That's a political position. That means we've become political activists, in a sense, and some could argue propagandists, right? And there's some merit to that.
I don't think there's any untruth there, Lawrence.
Yeah, it's total truth. But I think the interesting thing about this is that because he is the current president, I think people forget every Republican goes through this.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think that people hate him so much when it comes to the media that is so out in the open now. And quite frankly, I don't think the media really understands that they're picking a side right now. I think they're so blinded by their own disgust of the president and their own bias that they don't realize that they're picking a side. One last thing. I think people criticize Fox a lot, but there is a clear line at Fox. News division and opinion.
Right.
And that line, it's open. They tell you exactly what they're going to do. And I think that's unfair for people to compare us to the other network and say, oh, the opinion people aren't doing hard news. Well, their opinion.
CNN, I cannot find where the line is half the time.
There's none.
You watch Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, and you can't tell if it's Abbott and Costello or straight news. I don't know. And I like Abbott and Costello. Don't get me wrong, Cuomo and Don. Talk to you later.